Our next task to complete before going through the process of bringing clients into this WSUS infrastructure has to do with creating a group structure that the clients will eventually go into. Here baked into WSUS are a variety of different groups that you can create. As you can see here, there is an all computers and unassigned computers groups that both of which are created right out of the box. If you wanted to create new groups, you could right click here and choose to add a computer group. So essentially just a location for different machines to end up locating themselves into. The best practice here usually is to try to create as few groups as possible. Most often what you find are a couple of computers that are in a test group, perhaps even one or two different test groups, one for the initial release of the update, a slightly larger group to test out possible conflicts with different applications you may have, and then usually just the rest of the computers that make up your organization. If you have fewer groups, then that just creates much less of an administrative overhead when it comes time to approve the different updates for assignment to those groups. Now, where things get a little crazy, actually, is that here in WSUS, there are in fact two different ways in which machines can get assigned into the groups that you create. And if we come down here under Options, we can take a look at the Computers item down here, which is where we actually determine which of those two options we're going to choose. In the first option, we have a server-oriented approach, or essentially you just clicking on that computer name and plugging it into the group that you want. When you choose to use the Update Services console, every new computer that arrives as a new client will have to be manually dragged into the appropriate location in the group structure that you create. For a very small environment, this makes things really easy because there's no extra work that's involved. But in larger environments, you may actually want to go through using group policy, or to a lesser extent, some registry settings, but most often group policy for the determination of which computers should go in which groups. Now here in just a second, I'll show you what those group policies are. There are also some registry settings, but you don't commonly see those used all too often. The one thing about using group policy as the tool for putting computers into groups is that those machines will have to follow whatever structure you have in place for applying that group policy. Most often, group policy is assigned by organizational unit, so what generally happens is that your organizational unit structure ends up determining what your group structure will be here within WSUS. In most environments, the use of group policy is kind of the best practice, so I'll choose this second setting down here on the bottom. And with this now created, let's go ahead and create two different groups here, one of which will be our test group. So we'll create a computer group here called Test Computers, and then another group here that we'll call Production Computers. This gives me now the abilities to use group policy to assign the correct machines into either of these two groups.